die. Break even brothers part die.
Cool. Alrighty, we are live, and it's been a long time for episode 29. How are things going, Brad?
It's been exactly 1 month. We've had things happen, but it's going well. It's my 1-year wedding anniversary today, September 28th.
Congratulations.
Had a great time. Thank you. Yeah, things are going well. How about you?
Good. Yeah, just got back from Hawaii yesterday. Was there all last week, which was awesome. So that's part of the reason why you haven't heard from us in a little bit. But another reason, just to kind of cover our bases for why we've been radio silent last, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it's been, is I got pretty sick. Unfortunately, nothing was too bad. It eventually, of course, did recover, but there was like 2 weeks there where I was really down and out, and was on an inhaler, was on a steroid, was on an antibiotic. And I told Brad, I was like, I just can't do anything. Like there was nights where I was like, just couldn't sleep because I was coughing so much. So
that's crazy. That's scary. Yeah. Honestly, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah. I was nervous. And of course we had the Hawaii trip kind of coming up right up to that. And I was just like, I'm going to Hawaii, whether I'm sick or not. So, but fortunately I was good. Did a lot of swimming, a lot of stand-up paddleboarding. And it's all behind us, knock on wood. So it's been good. But that's why we've been MIA the last few weeks. So
yeah, and the sad part about being gone for 1 month is there's so much to catch up on that it's almost too much. So I've just been looking through the bookmarks and the messages that I send to Ben on a regular basis, and I was like, wow, 1 month is so long. Usually, we record these every 2 weeks, and I look through things, and I'm like, yeah, there's a decent chunk, but in a month cadence, there's a lot to get through, and I don't know, lots of nuance, lots of conversations, lots of releases, and I think coming up in October, I think will be a big month as well. So yeah, it's an exciting time, I think, right now with AI and just all the announcements coming out.
Yeah, and I feel like even when we do these normally every 2 weeks, I feel like, you and I have talked before, I was like, we could probably do that every week and there'd still be new releases to kind of catch up on. So of course, a month of no programming has there's lots of things that we're probably not going to be able to address in this episode, but we can save them for future episodes and kind of get caught up on things. Cool. So one of the things that I was interested to see was the announcement from Anthropic about using Excel with Claude. So for those that aren't in finance or accounting and that aren't that familiar with Excel, Excel is a spreadsheet software by Microsoft, and it has been the software to use if you're in accounting and finance. It lets you, of course, see your numbers really well visually. You can build out really complicated financial models. You can do all sorts of things with it. And for a long time, the lack of being able to kind of work with Excel has have accountants kind of waiting on the sidelines in terms of using AI, maybe more than or as much as they want to. But now with Claude introducing Excel, it's kind of opened that door a little bit, or support for Excel. So the way that it works, I was watching a demo and I thought it was really interesting, is that basically, and I'm not a developer, but as they were kind of explaining it, it's that Claude basically provisions almost like a virtual workspace or virtual computer, and it like generates the files, these Excel files that you can then download and then open up in Excel like on your computer. So being able to kind of work with Excel files and that chat interface, pretty cool. One of the videos I saw wasn't through Anthropic, but it was just a YouTuber. I'll try and find the video. I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but a YouTuber compared kind of prompting different chats, so prompting Claude to kind of make like an Excel model, a financial model, and then doing the same thing with OpenAI. And the results are pretty dramatically different. The Claude model had great formatting. The information was presented in a really nice way. The OpenAI model or OpenAI result was much more kind of bare bones. It didn't even like really look good. The formatting was really off. And so that was something that was really interesting to me, because I'm curious if that will kind of foster more adoption or use by accountants in different workflows. I have my thoughts on that that we can dig into a little bit more. But did you see that news, or is that not even made it into the programming world? Because I know you guys aren't big Excel users.
I'm honestly shocked that hasn't existed. Like, I think ChatGPT has been able to work with files, PDFs, images, Excel for some time now. So I think I did see the news, but when I saw it, I thought, okay, that's Anthropic playing catch up, and they do have really good models. So Anthropic kind of leads the charge on coding models, and their whole company kind of ethos is, if we create the best coding model, we'll create the best model for everything, because everything is kind of underpinned by systems thinking and programming. And even as you mentioned, Excel, in the background, it's probably writing Python code, executing
Yeah.
on, Excel sheets, generating output, etc. So I am surprised that it took that long. It seems to me maybe they handle it a bit more uniquely than other providers, where other providers maybe just handle it with like a generic, we'll take in any file, but maybe Claude has specific reasoning or capabilities that are kind of fine tuned for that model to handle Excel. Because I've used Google Sheets Excel, and or Google Sheets AI, where it's like
Mhm.
able to do things, and I personally found it pretty lackluster. Wasn't very
Yeah.
useful. Couldn't do anything that I really wanted. And I even think they came out with like maybe it was Excel or Google, I can't remember. But when you type in a formula in Excel, there's like a equal AI where you could just like
Yeah.
chat in something directly. And I thought, that sounds like such a good marketing feature, but who is actually using that to power real sheets with real data? I don't know. My guess is not many. So my two
Yeah.
cents is, I think it's exciting that it's out. I'm surprised they're playing catch up, but maybe I haven't worked with it. Maybe they have a much tighter integration, and better output, better parsing. So that can make a big difference, honestly. Working with your own data, that's like a
Mhm.
huge unlock.
Yeah. To me, it's interesting, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but like Excel to me, first of all, I think some of the problems or what's kind of causing it to play catch up, I think, is on the like Microsoft side, because like you said, you can always work with CSV files or like Google Sheets, which is like a web-based, system, but you couldn't really work with like Excel files, like Excel spreadsheets. And also in this announcement, I guess we didn't touch on, is PowerPoints. So basically, I think that Anthropic has kind of developed the ability to work more with like the traditional Microsoft Office file types like Excel and PowerPoint, which is cool if you are really locked into the Microsoft ecosystem. But to me, I am someone who I don't think there's a ton of value in the long run in Excel. And I know I'm going to really get the pitchforks thrown at me by the accountants in the
I
room.
thought you've mastered Excel, though. That just can't be
I
true.
was I was Excel's biggest fan. I mean, when I came out of school, it was like that was what you needed to do. I bought a course on it's called Wall Street Oasis, or no, can't remember. Damn, I can't remember what the course is called. I think it might have been Wall Street Oasis, but it was like you build financial models and learn how you can,
Mhm.
use different formulas and all that. And that was like time well spent, because it definitely paid off in my career. But now we're in an era where, like, does that really still make sense to do? Like the way I think about accounting work, and I've touched on this before in other episodes, so I won't dig into it too much here. But like if you have work that can be done and it's like a series of steps and it's logic driven and you need to do it that way every single time, doing that in an Excel file is a fool's errand, in my opinion. You're
Mhm.
much better off, having some code solution, having an agent be able to do that as a tool or as a graph. Again, I've touched on that before. But where I think this could be helpful is there is certain work that accountants do that is kind of more like ad hoc. Like you who say, your boss comes to you and says, "Hey, I need you to go look at the, top 10 vendors that we spend money on in general administrative expenses." Like, okay, that's not something that you like do every single month. Maybe that's something that just kind of came up when your boss gave it to you. So that makes sense. And that's where I think something like this could be useful, because you can throw it in a Claude and say, "Hey, here's my raw data. Make me a PowerPoint, make me an Excel file that kind of really highlights what I'm after." Beautiful. Think that makes sense in the short term. But then I think even in the medium term, and this is where my tinfoil hat on a little bit, Brad. I think even in the medium term and long term, you're going to be giving that data to your boss, but we all know that it's going to be agent to agent at some point, right? The agents aren't going to work with Excel files. Like they're going to work with just regular, like, raw data. And so, like, is this really that cool? It's
Mhm.
cool. Is it really, groundbreaking, in my opinion? No. I think it's a band-aid for how, I'd say, I'm gonna say finance, but not just finance, but any kind of knowledge worker that uses Excel a lot. I think it's a stopgap until there's a bit more of like a agent to agent interface that we can kind of plug into and have them do the work for us. They're not gonna be sharing Excel files like we humans do, for lack of a better word.
It sounds like we might need to cancel the World Excel Championship along this tinfoil hat of yours. Maybe it's not useful anymore, and we move on to programming being the end all be all.
Well, that's a hobby. People that do that. That's a hobby for them, and more power to them.
Did you qualify? I can't remember.
I didn't actually try, but like I think I could have. I had all the hotkeys down, like all HOI is like auto align the columns, all ESV, pay special. Yeah. I had all my hotkeys. Like I was an Excel, I'd say power user, but then you got to look at the writing on the wall and go, why would I do this myself? Like in really think about like the Matrix where Morpheus gives the pill to Neo. It's like pandas was like me taking that pill, and I was like, wait, I don't need to do this anymore.
Python pandas, you heard it here first.
Yeah, automate the boring stuff by Al Zweigart. I think I messed up your last name, sorry, but yeah, I mean that book and pandas. There's a book, I think it's called Python and Finance by Yves Ipselich. I got good memory. I'm pretty sure that one's right. But those books like changed me in like 2016, 2017, and then now here we are, where like you said, when you give AI a prompt to go do something in Excel, it's really just writing a Python script to make the Excel file for you.
Behind the scenes, definitely. Sometimes it does show you, sometimes it doesn't, but it's definitely the logic and the output and the parsing is all done through a sandbox coding environment that it does not expose to you most of the time.
Yeah, and so like it's doing that extra step for our benefit for humans because we want that. But like AI is not going to care about that. They're just going to, it's agent to agent is just going to share the data around and whatever, JSON, whatever the format is. It's like, we're going to look back and be like, who cares about Excel? That's my hot take. It might take a little bit of time, but with how fast things move with AI, I think it's going to be, take whatever you think it's going to be and take 2 or 3 years off of that because that's going to be, I think, a big change for people, especially in finance.
I think recently people have been talking about Dario, Anthropic CEO, chatting about the length of tasks that AI can do autonomously. So as we've kind of ramped up on the coding agents, we're getting like 1 to 2 to maybe 3 hours maximum output that is high quality output that an AI can kind of triage and do by its own. And part of that is models getting better, the tools getting better, thinking like chain of thought, delivering a lot better results, and fine tuning these models to make tool calls that don't fail. But I think recently their CEO was mentioning that it's on the horizon of days. So I think 2026, like maybe at the end of 2026, they had mentioned AI will be able to run for days, like unsupervised with high quality output. And to me, that's huge because we only have so much attention and we can only do so much as like a human. Like I can work, if you've heard of deep work, you can work 3 or 4 hours, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours, really good, high quality work. After that, for, a waking cycle until you go to bed, you're not getting as much quality work. You can still do it. It's challenging. But having AI run autonomously for multiple days, like that's insane. I think it's an exciting future, but their CEO definitely pushes the boundary in terms of headlines. He's talked many times about, like workforce being gone, AI automation to the moon, when like Anthropic's doubling down on hiring. So it paints a weird picture, but I think when you mention agent to agent, it brings up a point in my head that we're getting complicated, sophisticated AI systems that are hitting expert level task responses in various categories, and we're getting autonomous agents that are running for a longer duration with higher trust. Like, do we need that kind of handoff of Excel files, or are we going to be able to just orchestrate the system from end to end of like connecting these two systems and say, just go? And it might create an Excel file and on the way, pass off data, et cetera, but maybe it doesn't need to do that at all. And like the final output could be Excel, but that intermediate layer is just you providing the credentials to these systems and it figuring out what to do with that, with MCP and all that stuff. So kind of an exciting future. I'm very ready for more hands-on AI to do things that I don't want to do, so I can do the things that I actually want to do. And I think this whole Excel announcement brings me closer to like, I don't know how to use Excel that well. I'll be honest. Like I'm a programmer. I'm good at that part of the job, but surprisingly, I thought Excel is kind of simple. And then when I want to do a few things, I'm like, I don't know exactly what I want to do here. I know what I want it to look like. I know what I want it to feel like, but I don't know what buttons I need to click to get there. And if I'm thinking in my head, I've used ChatGPT before to be like, hey, create a chart, create a table, etc. And to me, it feels kind of lazy. Like I have this gut reaction of like, I can't do this. Like this seems so easy. But in the future, like I feel like a lot of this will be generated through AI, whether that's Sheets, Excel, you name it. But I do think it's a valuable skill, kind of like programming underpinning it all. But at some point, you can get pretty far with not knowing it. So I applaud your tinfoil kind of conspiracy that it's not going to be used anymore, or at least to a degree that's much lesser than today. But it is interesting to see what that long-term horizon might look like.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I mean, just like breaking down accounting for a little bit, like, you know, let's just break down some parts of accounting, I guess, and see where like Excel still fits in that picture. I mean, you have transactions that need to be coded a certain way. So like think about like your bank feeds, or, if you've used personal finance apps, a lot of times once you've kind of coded something a certain way, the app kind of suggests that going forward, right? So like that machine learning, that's nothing new. That's not even really an AI principle. It's really more machine learning, which is really probably better. And most GL systems, modern GL systems now that accountants use, has that feature. If they don't, then they're just behind and you shouldn't use them. So like, okay, category matching and transaction matching, that's already pretty much baked in for accountants. And then beyond that, if you go into like a month-end close where it gets to the end of the month, you need to perform a series of journal entries to get the books to be in a certain way for, US GAAP, for generally accepted accounting principles. Okay, well now, and I have a set of videos on my own YouTube channel called Augmentic Accounting, shout out, self plug, where you can kind of code those workflows to do that work for you, to do those month-end journal entries for you. And even if you don't want to code it yourself with an agent, so many different providers out there, like Zapier or Zapier, whatever their name is, Make, they all provide this kind of low code or no code agent builder where you can kind of do these things yourself. So that series of work that I've kind of talked about, where it's like a series of steps that you do every single month end, that can be automated without Excel now. Like we've moved past that. And so really all you have left is like those ad hoc requests, which I think are good. And then you can spend more time on that, which is great. But you have a lot more time on your hands than you did before, because this transaction matching happens on its own. And the journal entries and all that manual work that you used to do can be done on automatically by an agent. So like that is going to shift something. Like there is going to be an impact to that. And also too, it's like, well, does that change what the going rate is for someone in this profession? Like if you are now being focused on these ad hoc things, like, okay, is that what you were hired on for? Does that necessitate some kind of change in pay or skill set? Like there's just so many questions that you can kind of branch off from that, those truths, which are that, one, like a lot of work, and this isn't true just for accounting, I think this is true for a lot of kind of white collar knowledge work, if that can be done by an agent or is already being done, whether machine learning or some other technology, like how does that change things? It's a really interesting question, and I don't agree with the headline stuff, like where it's done to hype. There's some self-interest there from the Anthropic team for sure, but there's not. I don't think it's a complete fabrication either. It's a really interesting question at a minimum.
I mean, I think it kind of touches on the software engineering impact, where being a new grad at this kind of in 2025, coming out of college with a computer science degree, the landscape is extremely different than, when I left college and graduated. Like it was easy to find a job. You didn't have to fight for interviews. You weren't fighting against AI because it didn't really exist in the same capacity. I do wonder if it'll affect others the same way, where AI gets this baseline productivity and that becomes the standard. And if you're not above that, you're not necessarily hireable, which is a sad reality, but it does open up like opportunity for other things, where you might not spend your time in Excel, but you spend your time in higher level thinking or system design or some other component that can draw business value, while AI can do the part that it's still valuable, but just maybe a different valuable. And I think that's where software engineering comes in, where, I'm chatting with AI all the time. Like every day I'm getting stuff done through AI, and that makes me more productive, but I'm focusing on a different part of programming that I wasn't necessarily focused on 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I think it's this long-term horizon shift where programming is extremely aligned with LLMs, and it makes it quite easy to get things done. I think as Excel becomes a first-class citizen within Claude, that makes that more of an opportunity for it to be kind of revolutionized by AI. And I think
Mm-hmm.
they did a good job with this release, and they probably have thought a lot about how to package it up and push it out. I think Anthropic as a company is very good at having high quality stuff, even if it takes a while.
Yeah.
Their latest release is like Opus 4.1, really, really good. And I'll touch on later kind of some of the problems that they're running into. But I'd say overall, OpenAI ships faster, has more people, does more things widely. And I think Anthropic as a company focuses in on this core like developer plus other things. And like that plus other things now includes Excel, which is exciting. And yeah, it'd
Yeah.
be interesting to see how this evolves over time. If there's some elimination of like junior accountants, for
Yeah.
example, based on this kind of, you know, AI understanding of how to wield Excel to some degree.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say this because I mentioned it on my again my other YouTube channel, Augmentic Accounting. I don't think it's fear mongering to the kind of say and acknowledge that like there's probably going to be able to have fewer people do more work or do the same work. That just seems like a very, and no matter what kind of line of knowledge work you're in, it seems like a very logical conclusion. Now, like to what scale, that's probably up for debate, but like at a minimum,
Well,
more
actually,
people.
one thing that just reminded me of that, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good.
I
Yeah.
think the Amazon guy, CEO, someone CFO was like 2 weeks ago had mentioned the exact same quote, which is we have like X headcount, which is in the hundreds of thousands or
Yeah.
maybe even more. I don't remember exactly, but I think he had mentioned like over the next 5 years, AI is coming and we're gonna do
Hmm.
more with less people. And like what that looks like, we don't know, but we know it's coming. And I
Yeah.
think that was really telling headline of people know it's powerful. We just don't know what's going to happen. Like Excel popping
Yeah.
up could be an opportunity. Programming getting better. Like we eliminate entry level programmers. Like it's just a harder world to be an entry level programmer. And I think that would continue down the line with these AI
Hmm.
capabilities, things that we don't even know what's going to happen. But it's very much like the whole business landscape is very focused on efficiency, and AI plays to that to a large degree. And so, yeah, I think the underlying theme is do more with less, and
Yeah.
AI is sitting there like powering that whole idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, exactly. And I think so, like, how far you want to take that scale, I think is, again, up for debate, but like, certainly it seems like that is a accepted conclusion. But I think and again, what I mentioned in my other channel is like, that doesn't mean that you need to be fearful, but I think it means that you need to lean into certain areas. Like, I think if you can build out some kind of automation or work with agents or AI much better than the next person, then of course that's going to be where you can kind of dig in and still be valuable because businesses are going to change. Say there's an automation that works right now, but then the business goes and adds a new product line, or they go and stop offering that product, where someone's going to need to kind of change that automation or update the automation. And so there'll be new responsibilities that come, but I think leaning into being able to kind of build with these tools, not just be a consumer, is important. But then I think also too leaning into like the social skills aspect of it, because you could always be a better, you don't have to even be a customer service to think about like customer service. Like I am, an accounting professional. My customers are like the teams I work with, like the external stakeholders and my team, to try and make sure I am, communicating clearly, that I am, delivering what needs to be delivered on time. Like, so there's a customer service, like a human element that you can kind of lean into as well. And so I think that's what I would kind of tell people, if they're in school now or they're worried about, they have this anxiety about like job elimination, I would just say like lean into being able to build these tools. Again, whether it's code or whether it's, low code like Zapier, like, pick your poison. I don't think you can go wrong either way. But then also to like just focus on being more personable and making those connections with people, because I don't think that will ever go away. There's the whole talk about like AI chatbots that you do customer service with, or like when you pick up the phone and call like, Hawaiian Airlines, if it's an AI, like everyone immediately just gets turned off by that, I think. And I think that isn't going to stick around or be like the norm where you just talk to robots all day. I think the human element will still always be there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think the biggest part of like the AI workforce shift is building with it and using it. Like the one is
Yeah.
using it on a frequent basis to get comfortable and familiar with it. If you can build on top of it, even better. And I think before both of those is kind of having the mindset to be open to it as well, because there are lots of folks who do see it as a threat and don't want to partake and like feel it's this kind of existential dread that's coming and it's going to do a lot of harm. And with new things, it can do poor things or bad things that we don't expect. But I think in the general consensus, being adaptable and shifting and, listening and learning and being aware that things are coming as like the first step. The second step, use it, build with it, get familiar with it, get comfortable with it, and start leading some of that stuff. Because in my day job, as I use AI, I frequently show people like, this is how I got the output from AI based on this chat. And oftentimes, like people that I work with are surprised at the way I talk to AI because it's so thorough, detailed, and like technical. And I've continuously refined in how I've approached AI, how I conversate with AI, how I find the maximum output. By no means am I like the top AI prompter or anything close to that, but I found something that works. There could be, many things that work better, but I think as you get familiar with things, you realize what works and what doesn't. And that depends on lots of factors. So I'd encourage people to just like get more familiar and open with the tools, because there's so many tools that pop out there, so many different chatbots. Like just try things. It might suck. It might not. Don't give up on the first try. It's really easy to kind of say, oh, everyone's telling me AI is good. Then I tried, like, example, Google Sheets AI. It sucked. Yeah, I think it sucks. But if you tell me about Claude Code or, other things like Cursor, which write programming code for me, those are great. Like, there's different categories that do different things. So definitely keep an open mind and like try to step into that uncomfortability in AI tooling. And I think that gives you the most growth and positions you pretty well, I would say, in the kind of like 2025 AI driven workforce surge.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, sharing, and I think people sometimes have an apprehension to sharing things sometimes, not always, but because they feel like they need to like that's going to keep them like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it just there's a bit of gatekeeping that sometimes goes on. Yeah, and so like, but just in this world, I think you just got to share and if anything, put your a light stamp on it in terms of having your name be like, oh, okay, yeah, Brad showed me this, and Brad showed me that, because then it's not that you need credit, but it's just that people know that you are someone who is open to sharing things, and again, they can go to you if they need help. Like that's just, I think, a human forward kind of thing to do. So yeah, I agree on all counts. One quick last, Excel thing, because I know we talked about Excel a lot, but this was interesting, and it's from the decoder.com, which I've never, really gotten news there before. But then it's also from builtin.com. So two different websites are reporting this. But that Microsoft is reportedly allowing in its kind of Copilot, which is like their AI solution, they are allowing users to pick Anthropic models instead of the default OpenAI, which to me was really interesting because, Microsoft, we talked about Microsoft has this relationship with OpenAI where they are like investors or partners. I don't know what it's called technically. Maybe you know better than I do. But like the fact that Microsoft is allowing Anthropic models to be chosen if someone's using Copilot, again, maybe in Excel, right? They can do the equals AI. Instead of hitting the OpenAI model, it hits, Opus 4.1 or whatever. That to me is really interesting. And I think, what's going on there, because it just seems like an anti-beneficial move for that OpenAI partnership. And we've talked about rumblings there in the past. Like, what do you make of that? What's your thoughts on that?
I've heard lots of different things about the whole partnership, how it's evolved, like the stances across both OpenAI and Microsoft. I think the underpinning theme on that decision is Anthropic has really good coding models, so it's hard to look past that. I do think OpenAI caught up quite significantly with GPT-5 and GPT-5 Codex, which is their latest model that released about, I think, a week and a half ago when we're recording this. But I think Microsoft was like, hey, I want intelligence. I have this great tool, this harness that can do good stuff, but it needs great, underpinning technology of a model. I think Anthropic was leading for, I don't know, 3 to 4 months on this is the best model that writes code. And therefore, when you're creating a coding tool, it's hard to say, oh, I'm tied to OpenAI, but they don't have, quote unquote, the best coding model. Therefore, I need to look elsewhere. And I think that partnership alone, if I remember correctly, and I don't fudge fudge up any of the understanding. It was they invested in OpenAI, I think $1 billion, or maybe for like some certain percentage, but OpenAI has gotten so much more funding that I think people were speculating that is completely like drowned out and not that useful anymore. And like there are multiple rounds past that it's super diluted, that it's not that big of a deal anymore. So I don't know if this is fully true, and this is just what I was reading online, but to me, it seems like the best way to be productive in the AI landscape is to have a harness that can swap out any model, because the competition is neck and neck. We have Google swinging big. We have Anthropic releasing consistent model updates. We have OpenAI, who does an extreme amount of marketing and sometimes delivers. Like they sometimes deliver. So can't put them, off top three. But I think the general theme is make your AI tool as easy to hot swap a model as possible, because they are seriously very close. And a month or two later, something else takes the charge. So I think the Microsoft OpenAI one, a great initial investment. I think OpenAI has ballooned past any evaluation that has, was then the case. And therefore, it's not that big of a deal anymore, if I understand correctly. But again, I could be wrong about this.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say one more thing on that. We can move on. The article mentions, and I'm going to try and like paraphrase it here, but the industry has assumed that deep partnerships like the one between Microsoft and OpenAI would lead to exclusive integrations. However, Microsoft's move validates a best of breed or multi-model strategy, because the rationale is clear. Microsoft has invested over $13 billion in OpenAI. This is again being reported, and has every incentive to promote its models on its own Azure cloud, which, for people that aren't aware, Microsoft owns Azure, and OpenAI, I guess, runs on Azure cloud. So the article goes on to say the only logical reason to incur the financial cost and strategic awkwardness, which I think is a great word, of paying a cloud competitor, AWS, which runs the Claude models, with its most profitable product, Office 365, is that the performance difference on critical tasks, specifically automating financial functions in Excel, is too significant to ignore. So kind of a long-winded way of saying exactly what you said. They are saying, hey, even though we have this partnership with OpenAI, even though, that runs on our cloud services, we are willing to make a deal with our competitor, if nothing, if you want to call it that, in not just with Anthropic, a competitor of OpenAI, but also with AWS, Amazon as a competitor in the cloud space. We will make that trade-off just to have that better model. And again, I think it's also because Copilot is kind of, not used that much in my experience. So they're trying to fast forward that. So it's interesting the trade-offs that companies will make to get there, and will that bite them later? It remains to be seen. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think they just came out with a CLI too. I think it was GitHub Copilot CLI. So the CLI war has ramped up to full competition. I think they just released one like a day or two ago. It's really recent, but there's been so many CLIs. And speaking of CLIs, there's been a ton of conversation on Claude Code. So bring us back to May. May was the golden time for Claude Code, and you heard it here first on the podcast. I picked it up in May and I thought, holy shit, this is insanely good, just to be clear. And I thought, this is going to change everything. Fast forward in June, I was tweeting people, you got to try Claude Code. You got to try it. You got to try it. It worked really well. Like, honestly, the results were incredible. Then come July, August, it was a troublesome period for Anthropic. Everybody had picked it up. It was being rate limited, throttled, you name it. They came out with an email saying on August 28th, a month ago, we're going to have limits. And that's because people were running 10 Claude Code instances at once and just being abusive with their unlimited plan, which I don't think anybody should be doing. But long story short is they had poor model performance in July because the demand was high. The demand was high is because people were going ham on it because it was good. Then there was lots of speculation in September saying the model is acting poorly. Like what I got, in May or June is not the same as September. And then Anthropic never acknowledged it. They never said anything. It was kind of hush hush. And I think about 2 weeks ago, they came out with a post-mortem, which essentially in engineering terms, it's like, this is what happened and this is why it happened. And this is our mistakes. And this is how we're going to resolve it. The reason they came out with that is they had said, oh, we had roughly, I think, a month period of degraded model performance. It affected this many customers on this model, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of outlining the problem space and what they did to fix it and why it was complicated to find. But it was very interesting because there are people raising pitchforks consistently on Twitter saying, Claude Code sucks. This part of it sucks. And I never dipped that deeply into it being really bad. I think if I were to describe it in May when I'd first picked it up, 9 out of 10. Today, past month or two, maybe like a 6.5 to a 7.5. So there's definitely a loss, but it wasn't significant enough for me to be like, this sucks. I'm going to ditch it.
Yeah.
But there were people that had mentioned that. And I think it was great that they came out with this post-mortem saying we messed up because it acknowledged that there was a dip in quality. And the reason why I rated it only a little bit lower and not extremely low is because the people who it affected where they were choosing not the most intelligent model. So when you open up Claude Code, you're able to choose Opus, which is their most intelligent, or Sonnet. And they had mentioned, I think, 17% of customers were affected between this like 2 to 3 week window where they had deployed like a misconfigured Sonnet. And I never used that model, so I didn't encounter it. But I still felt like there was some performance degradation. So yeah, it's been kind of a bumpy road for Anthropic recently. They had Opus 4.1 come out, which is great. The CLI Claude Code has still been doing well, but I don't know if you've seen it, but on Twitter, there's an extreme amount of people switching to Codex, which is OpenAI's equivalent CLI. So I've given that a go, and I think it's pretty damn good. I think Codex does a really good job at thinking, but it still has some areas to grow. I kind of dodge and bounce back and forth between Claude Code and Codex. But have you seen any of the Twitter hype on the Codex switch?
No. And it was just interesting to me because I thought that Codex came out first. I can't remember if that's true or not, but I thought that Codex was an announcement that came out early on. And it seemed like, again, this is kind of more suited for developers, so this wasn't something that I really bit my teeth into. But I remember, at least in my anecdote, I guess, that I heard about Codex, I remember being part of the OpenAI announcement, and I thought I remember that happening before Claude Code. And so when you said that you were checking out or Codex and wanted to kind of talk about it here, I was really surprised because obviously, as you mentioned, you're a big Claude Code proponent.
Yeah.
And we didn't really, when Codex came out, we didn't really dive into it. So what's changed with Codex? Is it more that Claude Code is underperforming, or is there changes in Codex that have made you interested and see that as a better alternative right now?
Yeah, I think it's a multitude of things. I think Claude getting worse opened the door for opportunities. One, it got worse, and two, it added limits. So those are the two things that have shifted significantly since this golden period of like late May, early June. Two, OpenAI is spending a lot more time on Codex, and I think you're right. So the confusion in terms of Codex is that there's Codex CLI, which is the Claude Code equivalent, and there's Codex. And if I understand correctly, Codex is this product that allows you to open up like ChatGPT as an app and ask AI to do something on your code base. And Codex is the functionality in which it like has a replicated environment of your code on OpenAI servers. You're able to chat with that code base and get it to kind of like create changes for you on the fly. So the OpenAI is horrible at naming things, sadly. So they have Codex. I think they have Codex CLI, and they have Codex as a model, like quite literally like like they have, like 4.0, 03, all that. They have Codex as a model. So all that to say, I think you're right on Codex came out first, but it was a product, where what we're talking about now is more the CLI extreme equivalent to Claude Code. And I think one of the things that changed recently, again, OpenAI spent a lot more time here. So they release updates maybe once a week, which is before they didn't. And two, they came out with GPT-5 Codex as a model. So originally it used GPT-5 in Codex CLI. So bear with me with the terminology here, but GPT-5 on Codex was extremely slow. So GPT-5 was a good model. It was hard to prompt, meaning when you go to Claude Code, you ask it to do something, it can figure out what you want to do. I say that kind of in air quotes of you can have a poor explanation, but Claude Code would be like, I kind of get what you're trying to say. I'm going to go do that. Codex, you say, fix this or fix that. It does exactly what you say in a precision manner, and it doesn't get the overall feeling as much. Then they released GPT-5 Codex. So again, a new model, and they improved the CLI tool. This new model, what it does, has a flexible thinking strategy. Really important because GPT-5 was so slow, it was unusable. It was extremely good, but unusable because the iteration speed was terrible. So GPT-5 Codex came out, and the big thing there is it thinks dynamically. And the reason that's important for developers is sometimes you ask a large change from AI, it needs to do a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, a lot of understanding how things are done today and how to make them better. So if you imagine you're a new hire in a company, you need to go do a task, you need to go understand all the systems that you're working with and say, okay, now that I understand this, I can go make that change. Other times you could be a new hire and said, hey, can you go, update this to-do list and, cross off 3 items? Like, I don't need to know the system. I just come to this and, it's obvious. I think that parallel I'd like to draw to GPT-5 Codex, where there are some problems in programming that take a lot of effort, a lot of understanding. There's other problems that are very straightforward and should not take 5 minutes for AI to do that. And GPT-5 Codex was that unlock that OpenAI had to say, is this task difficult? Is this hard? Do I need to think a lot to get the right output? If so, I'm going to spend that time. If not, I'm going to breeze through this task. And so GPT-5 Codex gets you to a world in which you leverage GPT-5, which is really good at doing things, but you're not paying the price of I want to wait 5 minutes for a simple change. I think that together with Anthropic being slow and having degraded performance and limits, OpenAI releasing a model that's dynamic in thinking and spending a lot more time on Codex CLI itself has created a world in which we're on the fence. Like, honestly, I'm toying between both of them. I'm going to like a Claude Code meetup and roughly like a month from now in SF to talk to people. But it's a weird world where like Claude was killing it and ahead, and they have just butchered their lead and really, really lost developer faith. I think there's a new release coming in the next week or so. We've heard about Sonnet 4.5, but it's a weird time. I want it to be a time in which there's good competition, but I truly love Claude Code. It was great. And now we're at the spot where I want to get, the best output, but I'm not sure what tool does the best job. So honestly, it's a little challenging.
Yeah. And we talked earlier before we started recording this episode that you want to talk about the Codex and Claude Code thing. And I just did some quick, web research, and it seems like a couple things, that kind of came out recently, that were worth mentioning. And like you said, the Codex 5 model, representing a major leap forward. And I guess it's found, so there's a blog, where someone kind of talks about this. And I guess one thing that it's trained on complete, repos versus isolated lines of code. And I guess that in this article, the person is saying that lets it kind of do things. You can delegate more to it and have it be more end to end versus, Claude Code, and this is in there, where it's feeling like a collaborator, whereas Codex you can kind of delegate and like have it be a bit more autonomous. So that was one thing, and then the other thing was that, I guess GPT-5 Codex uses way fewer tokens. It's way more token efficient.
Yeah.
And it says, and this is their quote, and I'll link the article, using approximately 90% fewer tokens than Opus 4.1 and completing tasks more quickly. And then it does say, however, Claude models still excel at the detailed, high, fidelity tasks and complex multi-step operations. So just to what you had said earlier already, but just, use way more tokens, is way more efficient, way more fast, maybe just a better general purpose coding model, but where you need that special knowledge or really complex task, the Opus model is still the one to use in those situations.
Yeah, and I think GPT-5 Codex, the new model with Codex CLI, that is the first iteration in which you can give it a task that'll run for hours. I remember spending time on something. I had multiple tabs open. I asked Codex to do something. I forgot that it was still running because sometimes it takes too long, to be completely honest. Like, still not as fast as I'd like, but it does the job. And I came back and it had done all these things to get my React Native app to build. So much so that I looked at the chat history and I just kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling because it had basically thought by itself, read a bunch of files, continued down the rabbit hole that I would never have spent that much time. So I think it's really good at uncovering these really deep-rooted issues and figuring out, I'm going to keep going and keep going, where I think Claude has a certain limit in which it gets far enough and then it says, you know what, I think I know enough. And I think that confidence is good sometimes, but other times when you have a really hard question, it's like impossible for Claude to figure it out. For example, I had upgraded one of the dependencies in my React Native app And unfortunately, with React Native, the dependency situation is kind of a nightmare. You're kind of a layer away from native code, which and Apple platforms that's like Swift or Objective-C, you're writing JavaScript. And when you upgrade these dependencies, it just introduces potentially a lot of errors. And I had upgraded maybe 40 dependencies in my app for Split My Expenses, and one was breaking, but I didn't know why because the error message was generic. So I sent it to Codex and I said, "Hey, I upgraded these 40 dependencies. Here's my error message. Like, good luck," because I was lost. I was googling it, couldn't figure it out. Then it came to this conclusion that one of the packages had some update based on this complex like JavaScript engine that React Native runs. This is the issue. So I'd opened up an issue on GitHub. So I went to the owner of the package and said, "Hey, I upgraded my dependencies. It was a lot of upgrades, but Codex says it's your package that's breaking. I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I don't know if this is actually correct. I'm going to do more research, but if this is correct, could you fix this?" And then I think about a week later, another engineer came to my kind of issue post on GitHub and was like, "Hey, I was encountering the same thing. And I think Codex's output is actually correct. Like the way it described the issue and how to fix it was like completely correct." And again, this is like very, very in the weeds technical, which is why I couldn't even believe it myself. I was like, does it really know this much? Like, I couldn't even fact check it. And so long story short, this guy had come up with a fix to improve it based off what Codex had told me initially. And again, when it told me initially, I had it with a grain of salt because it spent 30 minutes trying to figure it out. And I was like, there's no way this is right, but I'm going to post it anyways. And again, I think that was a great example of Codex going really deep, where I think Claude is a little bit lazy and confident, and that produces different results. So at the end all be all, we're in this AI CLI race, and we've been there for a while, but it's really gotten to the peak of, do I choose Claude Code and suffer with its downsides, or do I choose Codex CLI and suffer with its kind of other set of downsides? And I'm hoping in the next month or two, as we wrap 2025, we get in a position where there's a clear dominant winner, and I don't have to kind of flex between both, since it's a little bit painful, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about JavaScript, and what you said about React Native just again reaffirms that JavaScript's the worst and should go away. One thing that's funny on the Codex CLI, and again, I was reading this, I didn't know this before we wanted to talk about it, but I guess OpenAI made it open source, which is interesting, and that is a newer development. So previously wasn't open source, and it was open sourced, the CLI, in April 2025. Under the Apache 2.0 license, if you know what that is. So they said they did that to encourage contributions and build a vibrant community, and give people a high degree of customizability. So I'm not sure if you've customized yours at all.
I have not.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that. And then the other thing it mentions, and again, this is just all coming together against JavaScript, which I love. The Codex CLI was transitioned from a Node.js implementation to native Rust. And
I did hear about that. Yeah.
This rewrite removes the Node.js dependency. Bravo. JS sucks all around. Everyone knows it. Streamlining installation and improving performance with faster startup times and lower memory usage. So I don't know if you can quantify how much of the performance improvements and lower memory usages specifically do that transition. But yeah, I mean, anytime you can get away from JavaScript, it's a win. You know what I mean? Everyone agrees. I
agree.
That, so yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Honestly, it's gonna be a crazy 2025. I was thinking, what if we do one mini bingo card, maybe a single bingo card questionnaire, for example, for, I don't know, maybe what do you think is going to be the most exciting release from now? We're talking September 28th till the end of the year. Because if you remember last year, we definitely had a busy period of December being kind of a shipathon for AI companies. So I think Google specifically has like a dedicated AI week. They hold a bunch of releases for that. If there's anything I've learned about Google and OpenAI, if Google is releasing something, so is OpenAI, because they want to steal the thunder. And Claude and Anthropic are just sitting there consistently pushing updates for the most part. But we haven't seen anything from them in a while. So from now until the end of the year, I guess I'll kick it off. I would love to see Gemini come back to kind of the top two coding models. I'll be honest, when Gemini 2.5 Pro came out, everyone was going crazy. Oh my God, so good, so good. And then, Opus came and Claude Code came, and I have never touched Gemini again. And I think one of the problems that they run into is Gemini is kind of a weird model. ask it to write code and it fails, it like tells you it's sorry and it has this weird, you know, deep understanding of feeling sorry for itself and like saying I'm not worthy. I don't know if you've probably seen that. We've talked about it on the podcast, but I guess long story short, I would love if Google could come back swinging on the coding model front, because I think their models are extremely good for general task purposes like 2.5 Flash, 2.5 Flash Lite, extremely cost effective and good. But as engineers, as programmers, as you know, someone who wants to work with Excel, we're thinking coding models all the way through. But Gemini 2.5 Pro is unfortunately not the best coding model. So I'm going to put one in Google's camp and say, I'm hoping Gemini 3.0 Pro, I'm just going to coin it at that, their next iteration of Pro, really brings them back into top two. And again, top two being OpenAI and Anthropic. I think that would be a sweet deal for Google to have all this amazing compute resources and build something exceptional.
Okay. You know, I'm a big Google fan, so I take some slight
Hate
offense.
to steal your thunder.
Well, yeah, I take some slight offense that you're poo-pooing on Gemini. It's still good. Don't hate on it.
It's good. It's good, not great.
We haven't touched on Banana, like their imaging.
That was yeah.
That's been a big I mean a huge, like the best, I don't know if like it's the best model, but like I've seen that everywhere, I guess, for lack of better you know, terms. But okay, so my end of year prediction in terms of AI, I think we're gonna have a massive security breach that's going to kind of involve AI. And part of what has me thinking about this, and I'll actually tie this into my bookmark if that's if we want to do bookmarks, is I think there was a post by someone who showed how the Google Drive MCP server, I think it was, or Gmail MCP server, could really easily be tricked into like giving up your email inbox. And so I'll link the video or link the X post because the person deserves the credit, and they really explain kind of how it all works. But I remember watching the video and being like, wow, that is really sneaky that someone can do that. And I think, of course, all these models are worried about security and they're constantly developing that. But there's such a push to get things out that I think sometimes things get sacrificed, like maybe security or quality checks. But so there's that push to get things out, and also there's just such a push on users to adopt and use these tools, right? And so you just have this like kind of anxiousness and FOMO of not using these tools that like, people need to stop and make sure they're using them correctly and be mindful of like what they're granting access to, and you know what these connectors are really doing and stuff like that. Because yeah, that was really interesting to see that AI agent get all the email information from that person's inbox. Do you remember which X post I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was ChatGPT turning on MCP, I think.
Yeah, it was an MCP related thing. Yeah, so I guess that's a segue into our bookmarks. That's my bookmark too.
Yeah, I think
that was crazy.
Yeah, I think it was ChatGPT. You have to go into the settings of the ChatGPT app, go to developer mode, which allows you to add MCP servers. Then you can add Google's. I think if you were asking AI to like look at your calendar, if someone sent you like a calendar invite with a malformed or like you know, kind of attacking prompt, it would then take over and be able to like read your data in some fashion, which is crazy. I mean, that means like it's almost like you're unaware that you have this calendar invite, but it's able to do so much harm. So yeah, pretty crazy. I think my bookmark, I was just looking through my list. I have quite a lot. One that I find really interesting is there's now a Chrome DevTools MCP server. That means you can connect with Chrome, get it to do browser automation, get it to do AI debugging. I think there's been a large influx of how you can make frameworks and applications more AI focused. For example, the Laravel framework, which I'm a big fan of, came out with kind of AI assisted editing, in which it modifies your kind of like your Claude Code system prompt to be Laravel focused. And I think this would be a good step in that direction, where when you use Laravel, you're writing a web app for the most part. When you create a web app, you need to test things where you're clicking on certain form elements, submitting forms, etc. Sounds like they could potentially integrate with the Chrome DevTools MCP and build out some way for you to say, can you build this feature, which is like a web form, and then can you actually test it with Chrome potentially in a simple manner, which it'll spin up a browser, click on things that you just created, then AI can verify end to end that it worked. That's the whole dream, is how you can close that feedback loop and say, AI built it, it tested it, and it committed it. That is the end all be all. So pretty cool release from Google. I'm glad they're moving fast. And again, another hat tip to Google. I think they're really coming out of this phase of stagnant development and like pushing the frontier of AI and spending a lot of resources there. So I'm really hoping they do well.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up there, Brad. Good stuff. Finally, glad to be back. And yeah, we'll do this all again next time.
Yeah, sounds good. Awesome.
See ya.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Brothers podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you may be listening from. Also, be sure to subscribe to our show and YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks, and take care. All views and opinions by Bradley and Bennett are solely their own and unaffiliated with any external parties.